The brass key felt cold in my palm as I slid it into the lock of the home I built with my bare hands. The door creaked open, but before I could take a step inside, my son's voice cut through the air. "Who are you? Get out, please." His eyes held no recognition, only dismissal, like I was a stranger trespassing. The key trembled, suddenly nothing more than metal. For the first time in my life, I wondered, was this still my house, or had it already been stolen? Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments, where you're watching from right now. The morning should have been ordinary. The kettle hissed, sunlight spilled across the kitchen tiles, and the old clock ticked with its stubborn rhythm. But beneath that routine, something felt off, like music missing a note. I set my bag down and placed my brass key carefully on the table. For years, that sound had been the anchor of my mornings. Today, no one looked up. My son scrolled on his phone, his wife stirred her coffee without even glancing my way. I could have been air. I cleared my throat. "Morning," I said, my voice steady. Silence. My son didn't answer. My daughter-in-law smirked faintly, her spoon clinking against the cup. She didn't meet my eyes, she didn't have to. That smirk was louder than words. The chair where I always sat, the one I had pulled close to this table since the day we bought it, was already occupied. My son leaned back in it like it was his throne, legs spread wide, arm draped over the backrest. He didn't offer to move. He didn't even acknowledge that it had been mine for decades. I stayed standing. "You're in my seat," I said softly. Finally, he looked up, and the corner of his mouth lifted. Not in apology. In amusement. "Is there assigned seating now?" His voice was sharp, casual, cutting. He turned back to his phone as if I wasn't worth a second longer. The kettle screamed behind me, and for a moment I thought it was my blood boiling. I turned it off slowly, the steam curling around my hand. I wanted to snap, to slam my fist on the table, but I swallowed it down. The silence pressed harder than any insult. I reached for the family photo on the wall, the one with my late wife smiling, holding our son as a boy. It wasn't there. In its place, a bland painting of flowers. My heart jolted. I scanned the wall, then the shelves. The photo was gone. "When did you move the pictures?" I asked. No response. My daughter-in-law finally spoke, her voice coated with false sweetness. "Oh, those old things? We thought the place could use a fresher look." Old things. That's what she called my wife's smile. My memories. My proof that this was still my home. I clenched my jaw, but forced calm into my voice. "Those weren't just pictures." She shrugged, sipping her coffee. "It's better this way." Better, for whom? I stared at the key glinting under the kitchen light. It had unlocked every door here, but suddenly it looked small. Meaningless. I carried my mug to the sink, trying to ground myself. The water gushed too loud, masking the sound of their whispers. But when I turned, I caught it, the quick exchange of eyes, the low chuckle from my son. It wasn't laughter. Not the kind that fills a room, but the kind that guts it. A private joke, with me as the punchline. "Something funny?" I asked, my voice firmer now. He didn't answer. He just smirked again, sliding his phone into his pocket like I'd interrupted him. My daughter-in-law reached for his hand across the table, and I saw it then, the unity between them. A wall being built, brick by brick, and I was standing outside of it. I pressed my palm against the table, steadying myself. My late wife's voice whispered in memory, "Don't raise your voice. Dignity speaks louder in silence." So I didn't shout. But I did meet his eyes and let mine harden. That's when I noticed something else. My key, the one I had placed on the table, it had been pushed aside, closer to the edge, as if it were in the way. Not by accident. No, His arm had brushed it there deliberately. Out of place. Out of respect. Out of meaning. The sound of it scraping against the wood was louder than thunder in my ears. I stared at it, and a thought sliced through me: they don't just want me silent. They want me gone. And as I stood there, the air thick with their whispers, I knew the morning had changed forever. Worse than being told to leave is being treated as if you were never there. That night, as I passed the hallway, I overheard my son's voice from the living room, low, deliberate: "We'll make him irrelevant." At first, I thought maybe it was just me, maybe the silence at the table, the smirk, the missing photographs were small misunderstandings. But by the next afternoon, the whispers had already traveled faster than my own steps. I went to the corner grocery store, the same place I'd bought bread and milk for 30 years. The bell above the door jingled, the smell of oranges sharp in the air. But the cashier, someone I had known since she was a girl, looked past me, her smile reserved for the man standing behind me. "My son." "Morning, James," she said brightly. Her voice softened, almost apologetic, when her eyes finally touched mine. "Oh, hello, Mr. Walker." "Mr. Walker." Not Dad. Not William. Just a formality, like I was a customer who had wandered into the wrong place. I glanced at my son. He smirked, adjusted the grocery basket in his hands, and didn't correct her. Didn't remind her that I was his father. Didn't even acknowledge the blood that tied us. On the way out, I heard it. Two women by the fruit stand, whispering just loud enough. "They say he's too old now. Maybe it's time he let go of the house." I tightened my grip on the key in my pocket until it cut into my skin. My house. My hands had built that porch, painted those walls, fixed that roof through every storm. And now, in the mouths of strangers, it was already slipping away from me. That evening, back at the dinner table, the air carried the same weight as the grocery store whispers. My son sat at the head, his wife beside him, their unity a fortress I couldn't enter. "Dad," my daughter-in-law began, her tone smooth but her eyes sharp, "we've been talking." I braced myself. "About what?" "About the rules here," she said. "Things have to change. You can't just do things your way anymore. This isn't only your house now." The words landed like stones. "Not only your house." I turned to my son. "Is that what you think?" He didn't flinch. "Yeah. You've had your time, Dad. But now, it's different. You either respect the way we run things, or..." He let the silence stretch, then leaned back in my chair, the one he had claimed days earlier. "You pack your things." The clink of silverware stopped. Even the clock seemed to hesitate before ticking again. I stared at him, searching for any trace of the boy I raised, the boy who once held onto my key ring when he was small and pretended he was the man of the house. But there was nothing left of him in those eyes. "You're giving me an ultimatum," I said quietly. "No," he replied, smirking. "I'm giving you a choice. Obey him," he gestured at himself, "or leave." My chest tightened, but I didn't let my voice shake. This is my house. My blood, my sweat. Your mother's laughter still echoes in these walls. My daughter-in-law cut in, her words slicing. And now it's ours. You should be grateful we're letting you stay. Grateful. For being allowed to breathe in the house I built. I glanced at the table, at the key resting by my plate. For years, it had symbolized trust, handed to family, to neighbors, always returned. Tonight, it sat like a line drawn in the sand. Grateful, I repeated, my voice a whisper. Yes, she said, folding her arms. Or pack. The kettle whistled on the stove, sharp and insistent, but no one moved to silence it. The sound filled the room, shrill and suffocating, until I reached over and turned the knob. The silence that followed was worse, it was final, decisive. I stood, sliding the key into my pocket again. Their eyes followed, curious, maybe even amused. They thought I was defeated. But I knew something they didn't. An ultimatum cuts both ways. They weren't just cornering me, they were cornering the man I had been my whole life. My daughter leaned forward, her voice low, deliberate, obey him, or pack. The next blow didn't come with words. It came with paper. I walked into the living room to find my son at the table, a neat stack of documents in front of him. A pen rested on top, waiting, like a trap disguised as ink. He didn't look up when I entered. He simply pushed the papers toward me with 2 fingers, as if he were sliding a bill to a waiter. "What's this?" I asked. "Just some adjustments," he said casually. "House expenses, bills, you know, grown-up stuff." I frowned, lowering myself into the chair opposite him. My chair. He didn't move from the one he had claimed. I scanned the first page. It wasn't about groceries or utilities. It was an authorization form, giving him full access to my pension account. My throat tightened. "Why would you need this?" He leaned back, folding his arms. "Because we're running this house now. And it's better if the money flows through us. Easier. Cleaner." "Cleaner?" I repeated. My voice was flat, controlled. "This isn't cleaning. This is theft." Before I could push the papers back, my daughter-in-law appeared from the hallway. She carried my bank card between her fingers like it was a trophy. She dangled it above the papers, smiling. "You misplaced this," she said. "Don't worry, we already took care of the groceries this week." Groceries. That word hit me harder than the documents. For decades, I had worked double shifts to make sure food sat on this table. Now they were buying bread with my card and pretending it was charity. I extended my hand. "Give it back." She didn't move. She only tilted her head. "We thought it was safer this way. You don't need the stress." Stress. They called it stress, but it was power, my power, slipping from my hands. My eyes drifted to the sideboard drawer, the one where I kept important papers, insurance files, the house deed, my late wife's medical receipts. I crossed the room, pulled at the handle, and froze. The drawer was already open, the contents rifled through. Folders half closed, papers shuffled out of order. I spun back to them. "Did you go through my things?" Silence. My son only shrugged, as if it were obvious. That's when my gaze caught the key, my house key, resting on the table beside the documents. The same key I had set down days earlier, now lying there like bait. Out of place. Out of respect. "You're crossing a line," I said. My voice was low, heavy. "No, Dad," my son replied smoothly. "We're fixing the mess you'd leave behind if something happened. You should be thankful. We're protecting you." Protecting. That word sliced deeper than any insult. Protecting meant controlling. It meant ownership. It meant stripping me of everything I had built. I shoved the papers back across the table, the pen rolling to the floor with a clatter. "I won't sign." For the first time, my daughter-in-law dropped the mask. Her smile faded, her voice sharp. "Then don't expect us to keep covering for you." "Covering for me?" I repeated. She stepped closer, her eyes narrowed. "Neighbors talk, you know. They think you're losing it. Forgetful. Weak. Do you want the whole town to think you're unfit? Because we can make that happen." The room spun, her words echoing like poison. Weak. Unfit. Irrelevant. I looked down at the key again, its brass gleam mocking me. For decades it had opened doors. Now it sat as proof that I was being shut out of my own life. I didn't answer her. I didn't trust my voice. Instead, I turned toward the window. Outside, dusk settled, the horizon painted with bruised light. And through the open glass, I caught a sound, a voice. My son's voice, low, muttering into his phone. "Yes, I'll get him to sign." "No, the transfer will go through. Don't worry." Transfer. My heart hammered. He wasn't just after my pension. He was after the deed. The house itself. I gripped the window frame until my knuckles whitened. That wasn't help, they were gutting me while I was still alive. From the hallway, his voice carried again, hushed but sharp, "We'll have the deed by next week. If you're still here, don't forget to subscribe, and comment your thoughts." The next evening, the air at the dinner table was heavier than any storm cloud. I sat at the edge, my plate untouched, my thoughts restless. The smell of roasted meat filled the room, but I tasted nothing. My son and his wife sat across from me, their whispers sharper than knives. I reached for the bread basket, but before I could, my son's hand shot out, pulling it toward himself. "Relax, Dad," he said, smirking. "We'll take care of you. Just sit quietly." The words burned, but it wasn't just what he said. It was the way he said it, like I was a burden, a child, an intruder in the very space I had built. "I'm not helpless," I replied, my voice steady. He chuckled, stabbing his fork into the meat. "No, you're just stubborn. Big difference." The room went quiet, the ticking clock growing louder. Then, in a single movement, he leaned back and kicked the chair beside him, the chair that had always been mine at the table. "Not yours anymore," he said flatly. The scrape of the wood against the floor echoed like a verdict. My chest tightened. I looked at the space where I used to sit, where my late wife once sat beside me. Empty. Replaced. I steadied my breath. "You think this is your house?" He didn't flinch. "It's ours now. And if you can't respect that, maybe you should find somewhere else to stay." Somewhere else. The words cut deeper than any insult so far. My daughter-in-law placed her hand over his, smiling at me with triumph. "We mean it, William. You either fall in line, or you leave." For a moment, the world tilted. Ultimatums, betrayal, theft, it had all been leading here. They weren't asking for respect. They were demanding submission. I looked at the table, at the brass key lying near the salt shaker. My hand itched to grab it, to slam it down, to remind them whose house this really was. But instead, I let the silence stretch. "You've made your choice," I said finally, my voice so low they leaned closer to hear it. My son sneered. "Damn right we have. Obey us, or get out." My daughter-in-law's eyes gleamed. "He'll cave. Old men always cave." I let the words hang. Let them think they'd won. Then, slowly, deliberately, I pushed my chair back. The legs scraped against the floor, harsh and final. Without another word, I stood, walked to the hallway, and opened the closet. The zipper of my old suitcase ripped through the silence. Each pull was louder than thunder. Their laughter died instantly. "Dad," my son said, confused. I pulled the suitcase onto the floor and began filling it. Shirts. A jacket. My late wife's framed photograph. My medicine. Every sound deliberate, methodical. My daughter-in-law stepped closer, her voice rising. "What are you doing?" I zipped the suitcase shut, the sound slicing through their panic. Then I turned, the key in my hand gleaming under the hallway light. "You gave me two options," I said calmly. "I'm choosing the third." They stared, confused, unsettled. My silence was no longer weakness. It was strategy. I lifted the suitcase, the weight grounding me. My son opened his mouth, but no words came out. My daughter-in-law whispered, "He's bluffing." But they both knew I wasn't. They thought I would bend. Instead, I smiled, and reached for my suitcase. As I stepped past them toward the door, I caught a glimpse of their faces, shocked, pale, suddenly uncertain. They hadn't expected me to walk away. They hadn't realized until that moment, the game had just changed. The sound of the suitcase wheels dragging across the wooden floor was the loudest sound I had ever made in that house. I didn't slam doors. I didn't curse. I didn't even look back. I simply walked out, the brass key burning in my palm. Behind me, silence stretched, broken only by my son's uncertain mutter, and my daughter-in-law's hissed question, "Is he really leaving?" I didn't answer. The night air outside was cool, sharp, and for the first time in years, it felt like it belonged to me. I wheeled the suitcase down the porch steps, the same steps I had built when my son was 10 years old. He used to sit on them, polishing his school shoes, waiting for me to come home from work. Now, those same steps carried me away. I checked into a small roadside motel on the edge of town. The walls were thin, the lamp flickered, the sheets smelled faintly of bleach. But the silence was mine. The key sat on the nightstand beside me, glinting under the weak light like a relic of a war I hadn't yet lost. The next morning, I knew I had to face reality. Bills. Accounts. Proof of who I still was in this town. I carried the key in my pocket like a shield and walked into the bank. The marble floor echoed with every step, and the young teller at the counter gave me a polite but distant smile. "Can I help you, sir?" I handed her my account number, asking for recent statements. She tapped at her computer, frowned, then excused herself. A few minutes later, the branch manager, a man I'd known for years, emerged from his glass office. His expression was careful, too careful. "William," he said slowly, gesturing me inside. I followed, unease tightening my chest. He closed the door behind us. "There's something you should see." He placed a file on the desk and slid it toward me. Inside were copies of documents, stamped, notarized, official. My name scrawled across them. But the signature, it wasn't mine. My throat went dry. "What is this?" "A transfer request," he said. "It authorizes the deed of your house to be moved into your son's name. The paperwork came in last week." I stared at the ink, my own name staring back at me in curves I had never written. "Forged. Stolen. I never signed this," I said, my voice cracking with quiet fury. The manager leaned forward, his voice low. "That's why I wanted to talk to you directly. The signature is suspicious. But if you hadn't come today, William, it might have gone through." The room tilted. My knuckles whitened around the edge of the desk. The walls I had built with my bare hands, the roof that sheltered my family, all of it was a signature away from being stolen. I pulled the key from my pocket, placing it on the desk between us. "This house is mine. This proves it." He looked at the key, then at me, his expression heavy. "You'll need more than a key, William. You'll need evidence. You'll need to fight this." For a long moment, I couldn't breathe. My own son. My own blood. Plotting to erase me not just from the table, not just from the photographs, but from the deed itself. I pushed the file back, my hand trembling. "Keep this safe," I said. "And make copies. I'll need every scrap." He nodded solemnly. "I'll help you however I can. But be careful. Once people start playing with papers, it gets ugly." Ugly. The word stuck with me as I left the bank. Outside, the sun was too bright, and the street too busy. I caught the eyes of a neighbor across the way, an old friend of my late wife. She hesitated, then gave me a look I couldn't mistake. Pity. Whispers followed as I walked back to the motel. People on benches turned their heads. A man by the newsstand muttered, I heard his own son is taking the house. Public fallout had already begun. By the time I reached the motel, my phone buzzed with a message. From my son. Just 4 words. Sign it. Or else. My pen had never touched that paper, yet my name was bleeding all over it. I stared at the message glowing on my screen, the forged deed fresh in my memory, and whispered to myself, if they think I'll sign, they've already lost. The motel room smelled of bleach and stale cigarettes, but to me it was a war room. I spread papers across the narrow desk, bank statements, insurance policies, old account records. 30 years of sacrifice reduced to numbers on sheets of paper. Numbers they thought belonged to them. The brass key lay in the center, gleaming faintly under the flickering lamp. It anchored me. It reminded me that no matter how many papers they forged, no matter how many whispers they spread, this house was still mine. By sunrise, I had a phone in one hand and their mortgage account on my laptop screen. The clerk on the other end confirmed my identity after a series of security questions, her voice polite but curious. Would you like to confirm the auto-pay authorization? Yes, I said. Cancel it. The click of the mouse felt like pulling a trigger. For years, I had carried them on my shoulders, paid every bill without hesitation. This time, the bills would bounce, and the silence would be mine. Next, I moved to the car insurance. I dialed the number, gave the details, removed both their names from the policy. When the representative asked, would you like to transfer coverage elsewhere? I shook my head, though she couldn't see. No. Just cancel. The keystrokes echoed like distant gunfire. Strike after strike, clean and precise. I opened my credit accounts. Their names appeared again, authorized users. How many times had they swiped, smiling, without once asking? I clicked remove. Their access vanished. Another chain snapped. By noon, I had cut every line they had tied around me. The room was quiet except for the hum of the old air conditioner. I leaned back, breathing slow, feeling the weight lift. For the first time in years, my account balance stared back at me, whole, untouched, mine. I picked up the key from the desk, rolling it between my fingers. You can forge a signature, I whispered, but you can't erase the man who built the walls. Images flashed in my mind, my wife painting the nursery while I hammered nails, my son playing on the porch steps, his little hands gripping the same key ring. And then the image shifted, to him now, sneering, calling me useless, planning to steal the roof above my head. Anger surged, but I forced it into focus. Rage was a blunt weapon. Strategy was sharper. I called the bank again, this time about the grocery transfers I had been sending every month, small amounts that covered most of their living costs. Stop all standing orders, I said firmly. The banker hesitated. Sir, that's a substantial amount every month. Are you sure? I smiled coldly. More sure than I've ever been. I hung up, the silence pressing in like a seal. My phone buzzed a few times, unknown numbers, probably creditors calling already. I let it ring out. As the sun dipped low, I poured myself a cup of motel coffee, thin, bitter, almost undrinkable. But it was mine. I sipped slowly, staring at the key on the desk, knowing the storm had begun. By nightfall, their phones would ring. Their bills would bounce. The cars would sit uninsured, the fridge empty, the mortgage unpaid. They had given me an ultimatum, obey or leave. I had chosen neither. I had chosen war. The click of my mouse was the loudest revenge I had ever heard. I leaned back in the chair, sipping the bitter coffee, and whispered, by nightfall, their world will crack, and they won't even know where the storm came from. Tell me, what would you do in this situation? I'd love to know. By Wednesday morning, my phone glowed with 12 missed calls. By Friday, there were 22. Each one was either my son or his wife. Their names flashing on the screen didn't sting anymore. Instead, it felt like watching vultures circle, loud, desperate, predictable. I sat at the motel's small desk, the brass key in my hand, cool and steady. The phone vibrated again. I let it ring, then played the voicemail. "Dad," my daughter-in-law's voice crackled, sharp and panicked. "The bank says the mortgage bounced." "What did you do?" "Delete." Next message, my son, his voice brimming with fury. "This isn't funny. The insurance is gone. The car's useless without coverage. You're making a fool of us. Delete." Another voicemail, this one shakier. "My daughter. Dad, the grocery store refused my card. They said the account was closed. Please, just call me back." Her voice wavered on the last word. For a brief second, I almost answered. Almost. But then I remembered her at the dinner table, repeating her husband's ultimatum, obey him, or pack. That memory steeled me. I pressed delete again. The motel room was still. The hum of the old air conditioner filled the silence. Outside, a train horn moaned across the town, long and distant, like the echo of choices already made. By Saturday, the tone of their messages had shifted. Less rage, more pleading. "My daughter again, Dad, please, we need help. Just this once. You can't do this to us." Then, her husband, snapping in the background, "Don't beg him. He owes us after everything." I leaned back in the chair, listening calmly, then deleted it. For the first time in years, their problems weren't mine. Their hunger, their bills, their panic, it no longer weighed on my shoulders. Each deleted message was a brick lifted from my chest. That afternoon, I walked to the diner across the street. The waitress, a woman who'd known me since my working days, poured me a black coffee. "Rough week?" she asked lightly. I only smiled. Not for me. The key sat in my pocket, its weight a reminder that I hadn't lost everything. Not yet. But peace never lasts long when desperation grows. By evening, the pounding on my motel door rattled the walls. I froze, heart steady, breath controlled. I stepped quietly to the peephole. My son stood outside, face red, fists clenched. My daughter beside him, pale, eyes darting, lips trembling. She looked more frightened than furious. "Open up," he shouted, his voice shaking the hallway. "You think you can cut us off? You think this is over?" She tugged at his arm. "Please, let's just talk to him." Her voice cracked, thin as glass. He shook her off, his eyes blazing. "Old man, you're going to regret this. You can't just walk away." Inside the room, I gripped the key tighter in my pocket. My pulse stayed calm, almost cold. They thought they could storm into my motel like they stormed into my house. But they were wrong. I didn't move. I didn't answer. The knocking grew louder, fists slamming, threats spilling into the hallway. But when I looked at my daughter's face through the peephole, I saw it, the first fracture in her loyalty. Her eyes weren't just pleading with me. They were questioning him. That gave me more strength than any lock on the door. For once, I wasn't the one trembling on the line. The pounding stopped. Through the peephole, I saw my son lean close to the door, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper, "Open up, or I'll make sure you never set foot in that house again." The pounding on the door had faded to silence, but silence wasn't peace. It was a coiled rope, waiting to snap. I stayed still, the brass key digging into my palm in my pocket, until a new sound reached me, a murmur outside, voices beyond my son and daughter. I stepped closer to the window and pulled the curtain back just an inch. The hallway wasn't empty anymore. A couple from the diner had paused, whispering, eyes fixed on my son's raised voice. The motel manager leaned against the wall, arms folded, watching. The fallout had spread, our private war was no longer private. A sharp knock again. "Dad," my daughter's voice broke through, high and trembling. "Please, open the door. Just let us explain." Her husband's voice cut her off, venom dripping. "Explain? He doesn't need explanations. He needs to pay for what he's done." I breathed slowly, unlatched the chain, and opened the door halfway. Just enough. Not an inch more. The dim hallway light carved shadows across their faces. My daughter's cheeks were pale, eyes glassy. My son-in-law's fists clenched and unclenched, his anger spilling into every movement. "You think you can humiliate us like this?" he spat. "You've ruined everything." I held his gaze, my voice steady, cold. "I ruined nothing. I only stopped feeding your greed." He took a step forward, but I didn't move the door. The narrow gap became my wall, my fortress. Behind him, I saw the motel manager shift, ready to intervene if needed. The crowd was growing. "You're starving your own grandchildren," he hissed. I let the word settle, then replied softly, "I didn't starve anyone. You did, the moment you tried to steal what wasn't yours." My daughter flinched, turning toward him. "What does he mean?" Her husband's jaw tightened. "Don't listen to him. He's confused." I leaned forward, just enough for my words to cut. "Confused? Then why did the bank call me about the loan application? $50,000, in my name. On my house." His face drained of color. My daughter's eyes widened. "What loan?" He snapped back, louder now, as if volume could replace truth. "Lies. He's just making this up to turn you against me." But the crowd in the hallway stirred. The diner couple exchanged glances. The motel manager straightened. Even my daughter's voice shook with disbelief. "Harry, is it true?" I reached back and placed the key on the motel table behind me, letting its gleam catch the light. A symbol between us. A line they couldn't cross. "You forged my name," I said, my tone ice. "You tried to gamble my house away. You didn't just betray me, you betrayed her." I gestured toward my daughter, whose lips parted in shock. "You lied to her too." Her face collapsed, the fight draining out of her. She turned on him, whispering, "Tell me he's lying." But he couldn't. His silence was confession enough. The hallway filled with murmurs. The gossip that had started in whispers was now alive in every pair of eyes watching. My humiliation had become his. "You don't know what you're talking about," he roared suddenly, slamming his fist against the doorframe. The motel manager stepped closer, but I raised a hand, calm as stone. "I know exactly what I'm talking about," I said. "And I'll prove it." His eyes darted, desperation cracking his mask. "You think a few bounced payments make you powerful? You're just an old man with a key he doesn't deserve." I glanced back at the table, the key shining under the lamp. My hand closed around it again, firm, steady. "This isn't just metal," I said. "It's proof of a life built brick by brick. You tried to gamble it. But houses don't fall so easily. Neither do men." The hallway was silent now, save for the sound of my daughter sobbing softly. She turned her face away from her husband, no longer shielding him with loyalty. The wall between us had cracked. He leaned in close, his voice dropping to a whisper sharp enough to pierce through the door. "This isn't over. You'll regret this, old man." I didn't flinch. I let the words wash over me like rain against stone. "No," I replied. "The only one who'll regret this is you." He froze for a moment, then stormed off down the hallway, his footsteps echoing like broken promises. My daughter lingered, trembling, torn between following him and collapsing where she stood. "Dad," she whispered, tears staining her cheeks. "I didn't know." Her words cut deeper than any threat. But I didn't answer. Not yet. I closed the door slowly, the lock clicking into place. The key sat warm in my hand, heavy with truth. Outside, the murmurs swelled. By tomorrow, the whole town would know. You didn't gamble money, you gambled blood. As the murmurs outside grew louder, I sat at the desk, the forged loan papers still burning in my mind. My son-in-law's threat echoed in my ears, venomous and unfinished. This isn't over. Stay with me, because what happens next will shock you even more. By Sunday morning, I didn't have to speak a word. The town was already speaking for me. At the diner, the low hum of voices carried my story like wildfire. I slid into a booth by the window, the brass key resting in my pocket, its weight steady. The waitress, Mary, poured my coffee without asking, her eyes soft with understanding. You did right, she whispered as she set down the cup. We've all seen the way he treats you. I only nodded, sipping slowly. The bitter taste was sharp, but it grounded me. Across the room, I caught fragments of conversations. He tried to take a loan, on his father's house. William paid for everything, and they still pushed him out. Ungrateful, that's what it is. Downright shameless. I didn't have to correct them. The truth was already working its way through the town, faster than I could have planned. Social exposure was a storm no one could hide from. The bell above the diner door jingled, and the room shifted. My son-in-law stepped inside, his shoulders squared, jaw tight. His eyes scanned the room, landing on me. The whispers grew louder. A man at the counter muttered, "There he is, the one who tried to steal his father's house." Another shook his head, turning away. He heard them. I saw it in the stiffening of his back, the twitch at the corner of his mouth. But he walked toward me anyway, his shoes striking the floor too loud. "Enjoying yourself?" he sneered, stopping at my table. I set my cup down slowly, meeting his eyes with calm steel. Coffee tastes better when it's paid for with my own money. The diner went quiet. Conversations paused. Everyone was listening now. "You think you're clever," he hissed, leaning closer. "Cutting us off, embarrassing us. You're just an old man with nothing left but a key." I slipped my hand into my pocket, fingers curling around the brass key. I pulled it out and set it on the table between us. Its metallic clink rang out like a gavel. "This key," I said evenly, "is more than you'll ever own. Because it represents work. Sacrifice. A name you tried to forge but couldn't carry." Gasps rippled through the diner. A woman at the counter whispered, "Forged?" Another man shook his head in disgust. My son-in-law's face reddened. "Lies. He's lying. He's trying to ruin me." But the crowd didn't believe him. The whispers turned into pointed stares, disapproving glares. Mary crossed her arms, muttering, "We all know who's lying here." My son-in-law slammed his fist on the table. "You think the law will be on your side? You think anyone cares about your stories?" I leaned in slightly, my voice calm, deliberate. "I don't need stories. I have proof." His face flickered, panic breaking through the mask. He realized I wasn't bluffing. I had something real, something he couldn't explain away. I picked up the key, sliding it back into my pocket, and finished my coffee in silence. That silence was louder than his shouting, more powerful than his threats. When I stood to leave, the entire diner seemed to move with me. Heads turned. Some nodded in respect. A few muttered words I caught like blessings, "Stay strong, William. Don't let them win." I walked past him without another glance. The sound of the bell jingling as I left was like a victory drum. Outside, the sun was sharp, the air clean. I pulled the forged documents from my bag, the ones the banker had given me, stamped and sealed. They were heavy, damning. And tomorrow, they would be in the hands of my lawyer. For now, though, the public had spoken. His reputation was already cracking. As I walked back toward the motel, my phone buzzed again. A message from my daughter. "Dad, please. I need to talk to you. Alone." Sometimes silence is the loudest testimony. I looked down at her message, the key warm in my pocket, and knew the next battle wouldn't be in whispers or rumors. It would be in the law's hands. By Monday morning, my anger had cooled into something sharper, evidence and resolve. The brass key rested in my pocket, heavy as a weapon. It reminded me of one truth: they could forge my name, they could whisper lies, but they couldn't erase what I had built. The courthouse steps felt colder than the motel, but the weight in my briefcase steadied me: bank records, forged signatures, bills with my name attached. 30 years of paper trails that proved sacrifice and betrayal. Inside, I filed the paperwork. Eviction notice. Fraud complaint. Restriction requests. The clerk looked at me with wide eyes. "Against your own family?" I met her gaze. "Against thieves wearing my family's name." The stamp hit the page with a thud that echoed like a drumbeat of justice. For years, my signature had fed them. Today, my signature was the blade cutting them free. By the time I left, the whispers had already reached the street. A neighbor I'd known for decades stopped me outside the courthouse. "We heard about Harry," he said cautiously. "The debts. The gambling. Is it true?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The papers in my briefcase would do the talking soon enough. That afternoon, the collapse began in full view. First, it was the creditors. I watched from a distance as two suited men knocked on their door, holding thick folders of overdue bills. My daughter opened it, her face pale, her hands trembling. Behind her, Harry barked angrily, waving his arms, but the men didn't flinch. Papers were handed over. Signatures demanded. His shouting spilled into the street, carrying further than he realized. Neighbors turned heads. Curtains twitched. Then came the job. A call from an old colleague confirmed it. "Harry's been fired," he said quietly. "Company found out about the fraud attempt. They don't want their name tied to him." It spread like fire through the small town. At the hardware store, men muttered over planks of wood. At the church steps, women whispered after service. "Did you hear? He forged his father-in-law's signature. Tried to steal the house." By Wednesday, their facade was gone. My daughter couldn't walk into the grocery store without heads turning. The same cashier who once ignored me now handed her change without eye contact. I saw her once, from across the street. She clutched a grocery bag to her chest, her eyes red, her walk hurried. She looked smaller than I remembered. For the first time, she looked like the child I once carried in my arms. But now, guilt had bent her shoulders. Harry, though, he only grew louder. At the bar, his curses echoed, trying to paint me as the villain. The old man lost it, he sneered to anyone who'd listen. "He's crazy. He's ruining us." But no one believed him anymore. His words clattered to the floor like broken glass, ignored and stepped over. That night, I sat at the motel desk, the key on the wood, papers spread like weapons. My reflection in the window looked tired, but not beaten. I whispered to myself, "You spent decades carrying them. Now watch them fall under their own weight." The next morning, I went to the courthouse again. The sheriff himself signed off on the restraining order. He handed me the document, his voice steady. "They can't come near you now, William. You're protected." I nodded, tucking the order into my briefcase. But protection wasn't the point. Exposure was. Dignity was. Outside, on the courthouse steps, I found her. My daughter. She sat on the cold stone, her hands covering her face, her shoulders trembling. She looked up when she heard my steps. Her eyes were swollen, her voice breaking. "Dad. I didn't know. I swear, I didn't know." For a moment, my throat closed. I saw her as a little girl again, tugging at my sleeve, asking for ice cream after school. I saw her wedding day, her smile brighter than the sun. And now, I saw her broken by her own choices, chained to a man who had dragged her down. I didn't speak. Not yet. She reached out a hand, but stopped halfway, afraid. "Please, tell me what to do." I looked down at the key in my palm, turning it slowly, the brass glinting in the afternoon light. For decades, it had meant belonging. Now, it was a reminder that not everyone deserved access. Their empire of lies collapsed faster than I ever built mine of sweat. As she sat crying on the courthouse steps, I closed my fist around the key and whispered to myself, "This isn't the end. It's the beginning of the reckoning." By Sunday, the whispers had grown into a chorus. Wherever I went, the diner, the post office, even the quiet benches in the park, eyes followed me, not with pity this time, but with recognition. Truth travels faster than lies when proof stands behind it. That morning, I walked into the church. The wooden pews gleamed under the soft light from the stained glass windows. The old bell had rung not 5 minutes earlier, and already the air buzzed with murmurs. I sat near the back, the brass key pressed warm in my palm, grounding me. As the pastor began the sermon, I caught fragments of whispers around me. William stood up to them. Harry forged the papers, tried to take the house. His own daughter, what was she thinking? I kept my eyes forward, my back straight. For once, I didn't need to defend myself. The town was doing it for me. Halfway through the service, the church doors opened. My son-in-law stormed in, my daughter trailing behind him, her face pale, her hands trembling. His steps echoed against the stone floor, loud, defiant. Every head turned. Every whisper hushed. He marched to the front, ignoring the pastor's raised hand. "All of you need to stop spreading lies." His voice cracked, but he pushed on. "William is sick. He doesn't know what he's doing. He's ruining his family." Gasps rippled through the pews. Someone muttered, "Sick? He's the one who forged papers." The pastor's voice was firm. "Harry, this is not the place." But Harry pressed forward, pointing at me across the pews. "Tell them, Dad. Tell them you're confused. That you didn't mean any of this." I rose slowly, the key gleaming in my fist. The silence stretched, heavy, expectant. My daughter's eyes met mine, glistening with tears. She didn't speak. She didn't defend him. I raised my voice, steady as stone. "Confused? The only thing I was confused about was how deep your betrayal ran. But the papers don't lie. The forged signatures. The debts. The gambling. It's all there." The crowd erupted. Murmurs turned to sharp whispers. I knew it. Stealing from his own father? Shameful. Harry's face reddened. He slammed a fist against the pulpit, rattling the pastor's Bible. "He's lying." But no one believed him anymore. Even my daughter stepped back from his side, her head bowed, her lips trembling. The pastor's voice cut through the chaos. "Enough. Truth defends itself, Harry. And the truth has already found you." I held up the key, letting it catch the light streaming through the stained glass. "This house, this life, I built it. Brick by brick, day by day. You thought a forged signature could erase that? You were wrong. What you tried to steal, you'll never own." Gasps and nods filled the room. People leaned toward one another, shaking their heads in disbelief at Harry. The weight of judgment wasn't mine anymore, it was his. Harry's chest heaved. He looked around, searching for an ally, but found none. Every face in the pews was a mirror of his shame. My daughter covered her face with her hands, shoulders shaking. He shouted one last time, his voice breaking, "This isn't over." Then he turned, storming out of the church, the heavy doors slamming shut behind him. The silence that followed was deafening. The pastor stepped closer, placing a steady hand on my shoulder. "William," he said softly, "sometimes the greatest battle is fought not in courts or papers, but in the eyes of those who finally see the truth." I nodded, slipping the key back into my pocket. Around me, people reached out, hands on my arm, quiet words of respect. "You did the right thing. We're with you. You never lost your dignity, William, they just lost theirs." For the first time in months, I felt lighter. Not victorious. Not triumphant. Just whole. Respect wasn't inherited, it was earned, and they had sold it cheap. As I stepped into the sunlight outside, the brass key warm against my palm, I saw him waiting in the parking lot, Harry, his face twisted with rage, his hands trembling. The war wasn't finished. Not yet. The church humiliation should have ended it. Any sane man would have walked away, admitted defeat. But Harry wasn't sane. Rage had blinded him. As I stepped out into the sunlight, the brass key tight in my fist, I saw him waiting by the edge of the lot, trembling with fury. "You think this is over?" he hissed. "You humiliated me in front of everyone. I didn't slow my steps. You humiliated yourself." He lunged closer, his face inches from mine. "You'll regret this. You'll lose everything. I'll make sure of it." I slipped the key back into my pocket and met his eyes, calm as stone. "You already tried. And tomorrow, the sheriff will see proof of it." He froze, just for a moment, confusion flickering across his face. Proof. He didn't know what I had in my briefcase. The next morning, I walked into the bank again. The manager greeted me in private, locking his office door behind us. He laid out the folder he had been keeping safe for me, official copies of the deed transfer attempt. My name forged, the notary seal fraudulent, Harry's scrawled signature beside it. But what made my stomach twist wasn't just Harry's hand. It was hers. My daughter's. There it was, clear as day, her name, her pen, her complicity. For a moment, the room spun. My knees almost gave way. My little girl, the child I had raised after her mother's death, the one I had carried on my shoulders through storms and laughter, had signed away my life. The manager's voice was cautious. "William, this is enough to bury them. Completely." I nodded slowly, forcing air into my lungs. I placed the key on top of the documents, the brass gleaming against the ink. "This isn't just paper. It's betrayal carved into law." That afternoon, I sat in the motel, staring at the signatures until the ink blurred through my tears. Forgive? Forget? No. This wasn't a mistake made in weakness. This was a choice made in greed. By evening, I met with my lawyer. A sharp man with steel-gray hair, he adjusted his glasses as I slid the folder across the desk. He flipped through the pages, his eyes narrowing. Forgery. Fraud. Conspiracy. They won't just lose the house, William. They'll face criminal charges. His words should have brought me comfort, but instead they felt heavy. I leaned back, the key warm in my palm. I don't just want justice. I want the truth to stand in the open. They stole in whispers. I'll answer in thunder. He nodded. Then we'll take this public. The next morning, the sheriff stood with me as I handed over the folder. His jaw tightened as he read the forged signatures. This is serious, William. We'll handle it. But handling it wasn't enough for me. I wanted them to feel the weight of every eye in this town. I wanted them to know the humiliation of being stripped bare, the way they had stripped me. So I made my move. That evening, I went to the town square where people gathered at the cafe and benches after work. My lawyer joined me, the folder tucked under his arm. When Harry appeared, dragging my daughter behind him, shouting curses, I didn't flinch. I stood tall, the key raised in my fist for all to see. "This key," I said, my voice carrying across the square, "is mine. This house is mine. And here," I pointed to the folder my lawyer held aloft, "is proof that he tried to steal it." Gasps spread through the crowd. People leaned closer, whispering. The lawyer flipped open the folder, showing the forged papers to the sheriff standing at the edge. The sheriff's nod was slow, deliberate. But then came the twist. My daughter's name glared back at the crowd, as damning as his. The whispers turned sharp. She signed it too. Even his own daughter? Unthinkable. Her knees buckled, and she covered her face with her hands. Harry shouted, trying to drown out the storm of voices, but it was useless. His voice was just another crack in his collapsing facade. I looked at her, my heart breaking and hardening at the same time. "You didn't just betray me," I said softly, my words carrying in the hush that followed. "You betrayed every sacrifice I made for you." She sobbed, her shoulders shaking, while Harry raged beside her. The sheriff stepped forward, taking the documents from my lawyer's hand. The decision was clear. The crowd had seen. The town had judged. And tomorrow, the law would strike. This wasn't betrayal, it was theft in slow motion. As the sheriff folded the forged documents under his arm, Harry's voice cracked in desperation, "You'll regret this, old man, because if I go down, I'm taking her with me." The courthouse smelled of old wood and paper. Every step echoed as I walked down the aisle, the brass key heavy in my pocket, like a stone pressing against my ribs. The gallery was full, neighbors, townsfolk, even the same cashier who once ignored me at the grocery store. Today, they were here to watch justice unfold. At the front, Harry sat stiff, jaw clenched, eyes burning with rage. My daughter sat beside him, her face pale, hands trembling as she twisted a tissue until it shredded in her lap. She wouldn't meet my eyes. The judge called the session to order. My lawyer rose first, calm and precise, laying the forged documents on the desk. "Your Honor, here are notarized attempts to transfer Mr. Walker's home deed fraudulently. Signatures forged. False witnesses cited. This wasn't a misunderstanding, it was theft." The judge flipped through the papers, her brow furrowing deeper with each page. She glanced at Harry. "Do you deny these signatures?" Harry shifted, his bravado cracking. "He's lying. He set me up. He's always hated me." My lawyer didn't flinch. He pointed to the notary's stamp. "The notary has already confirmed, this seal is counterfeit. The bank manager and sheriff both have affidavits." A murmur spread through the gallery. Whispers turned into nods. The weight of community judgment pressed against Harry, louder than any gavel. Then the judge's eyes landed on my daughter's signature. "And this? This is your name." The room went still. My daughter's shoulders shook. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she whispered, "I didn't know what I was signing. He told me it was routine. He said it was for refinancing." Harry slammed his fist on the table. "Shut up. Don't listen to him. He's twisting you." But she couldn't stop. Her voice broke, rising in sobs. "Dad, please. I didn't mean to hurt you. I didn't know. I swear, I didn't know." She buried her face in her hands, her cries echoing off the wood-paneled walls. I gripped the key in my pocket, my chest heavy. My heart wanted to believe her, to pull her back into safety, to forgive. But my mind knew, ink doesn't flow without a hand guiding the pen. The judge rapped the gavel once. "Order." She turned to me. "Mr. Walker, would you like to speak? I rose slowly, the courtroom silent except for my daughter's muffled sobs. I pulled the key from my pocket and set it on the witness stand. The metallic clang rang out, final and sharp. This house, I said, my voice steady, was built with sweat and sacrifice. I worked every hour God gave me to keep a roof over my family's heads. And they tried to steal it with a pen. I turned toward my daughter, her face streaked with tears. You didn't just betray me. You betrayed every sacrifice your mother and I made for you. Her sobs deepened, her shoulders collapsing inward. Dad, please, please don't destroy us. I'll do anything. Just don't take everything away. The judge's eyes flicked between us, but she said nothing. The silence belonged to me. Harry leaned forward, his voice venomous. Don't listen to her crying, Judge. He's the one tearing this family apart. He's enjoying it. Look at him, he wants revenge. I met his gaze with steel. No. I want dignity. Something you never understood. The judge cleared her throat. The court will proceed with charges of fraud and forgery. The restraining order remains in effect. A decision on restitution will follow. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Harry's face twisted, his mask finally shattered. My daughter collapsed against the table, sobbing uncontrollably. I picked up the key from the witness stand, its weight steady in my hand. My choice was clear. You didn't just betray me, you betrayed every sacrifice I made for you. As the sheriff stepped forward to escort Harry away, my daughter looked up through her tears, whispering, Dad, is there any way back? When the gavel fell, the sound echoed like thunder. The courtroom emptied slowly, whispers trailing in the wake of judgment. Harry's shouts grew smaller as the sheriff's boots carried him out in chains, his curses bouncing against the wooden walls. My daughter remained at the table, her head bowed, shoulders trembling, her sobs muffled in her hands. I stepped into the sunlight outside, the brass key warm in my palm. For months it had felt like nothing but metal, a useless relic of a house I had been cast out of. But now, in the light of day, it gleamed again, not as property, but as proof. Proof that dignity, once stolen, can be reclaimed. The crowd outside the courthouse parted as I walked down the steps. Neighbors I had known for years met my eyes, no longer avoiding them. Some nodded, some offered quiet words. You did right, William. You showed strength. You never stopped being the man of that house. The pastor was there too, his hand firm on my shoulder. Truth doesn't just free us, William, it restores us. For the first time in years, I breathed deeply without weight pressing on my chest. My dignity wasn't buried under their lies anymore. It stood tall, seen by all. But then I heard her. Dad. My daughter stood at the bottom of the courthouse steps, her face streaked with tears. Without Harry beside her, she looked smaller, like the child I once carried through storms, her tiny hand gripping mine. She lifted her eyes, broken. I'm sorry. I didn't see what he was doing. I let him lead me. I let him destroy us. Please, is there any way back? The words hit me harder than Harry's threats ever had. Regret in her voice, guilt in her eyes, it wasn't performance. It was truth, late but real. I held the key tight, my knuckles whitening. Part of me wanted to hand it to her, to restore the bond we had lost. But another part of me knew, the key wasn't just a symbol of home. It was a symbol of trust. And trust wasn't given freely. It had to be earned. I stepped closer, my voice low but steady. Forgiveness is one thing. Trust is another. You'll have to earn that back. Tears slipped down her cheeks, but she nodded, as if even that sliver of hope was more than she deserved. I walked past her, into the square where more townsfolk had gathered. They didn't whisper this time, they spoke openly. William's the rightful owner. He protected what was his. Family isn't blood, it's respect. Their voices rose, not as gossip, but as vindication. My humiliation had turned into his disgrace, my silence into thunder. Later that evening, I sat alone on the porch of my house. My house. The same steps I had built with my hands, now under my feet again. The key slid into the lock with a familiar click, the sound echoing like a heartbeat. Inside, the rooms were quiet. The photographs had been removed, but I pulled one from my suitcase, my late wife smiling, holding our daughter as a child. I set it on the mantel. The house felt whole again. I sat in my old chair, the key on the table beside me. For years it had been a tool. Then it had been mocked, pocketed, pushed aside. But now, it was something greater. It was dignity. It was justice. It was mine. And as the sun dipped low, painting the house in gold, I whispered to myself, family isn't blood, it's respect. And dignity is the inheritance I chose to keep. Family isn't blood, it's respect. And dignity is the inheritance I chose to keep. If you liked this story, like the video, subscribe, and share your impressions in the comments. To hear the next story, click the box on the left.